Now, the reason I'm talking about autoimmune disease is because I've put 7 autoimmune diseases of my own into remission. One of them is called myasthenia gravis. And by the time I was diagnosed with that, I was not only in a wheelchair and bedbound, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't swallow solid food. I could barely breathe. I couldn't walk or stand unassisted. And I was a few months away from death before they finally officially diagnosed me and started treatment. Now, even with their best treatments, which also included a thymectomy, so they removed the thymus, which is just above the heart. That's something that they will do for myasthenia gravis patients to lessen their symptoms. It made a small difference with me, but not a lot. Certainly a lot of pain to go through for not a lot of return. And after being bedridden for 10 years, I'd had enough. So I started doing research. Now, I'm not going to get into all the stuff that I tried. What I will say is that I made some discoveries. So first of all, your immune system, most of it lives in your gut. So if you have a healthy gut, your immune system is usually going to be healthy. If you have an unhealthy gut, your immune system will become unhealthy, and given time, it will often create autoimmune disease. Now, in my case, I did so much damage to my body that it just couldn't be fixed any other way than with the carnivore diet. Now, I had tried keto for a couple of years. It helped me lose weight. I had some minor improvements, but all the autoimmune stuff and mental illness and stuff that I deal with or dealt with, yeah, it wasn't really helped by keto. So I want to mention, I'm not going to out anybody, but I was chatting with somebody recently who has been carnivore for a while, and they add a couple of things that aren't really carnivore, and yet they've been healthy for years. It seems to be doing a great job for them. And so what they were eating is a little bit of dark chocolate, some avocado, and some blueberries. And so we were chatting that she had gone to her optometrist and they had found some pretty significant signs of myasthenia gravis. And they've got her booked for tests and all kinds of stuff. So, and some of them are very classic tests that they do to confirm myasthenia gravis. So this is why I tell people, if keto works for you and gives you all the healing you need, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine. However, if you're in this type of a situation where you're still having health issues and you're not carnivore yet, pure, clean carnivore, that's probably your only option for healing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all autoimmune disease can be cured by carnivore. First of all, I'm not claiming a cure. I'm talking about remission. So let me repeat that and be very clear. I'm not talking about a cure for autoimmune. I'm talking about remission. So what that means to you is that if you go off the diet, it will return eventually. Now, I know this is a fact for myself anyway, because I was diagnosed the first time with myasthenia gravis when I was about 12 years old. My martial arts instructor caught it, and he told me I need to go see a doctor. My family doctor confirmed it. He set up an appointment with a specialist, like the neurologist. And in the meantime, my mom took me to a naturopath. And that naturopath put me on a restricted diet and a bunch of vitamins. And my myasthenia went into remission, complete remission, before I even saw the specialist in Edmonton. And his conclusion was that my doctor was wrong, that I couldn't possibly have gone into remission with vitamins and diet. So when the next time myasthenia started coming back on regular diet, that was the last thing they were looking at. And unfortunate, but sometimes this happens. And, I had to get to a point where I realized that the doctors didn't have the right answers. They weren't helping me. I was still bedridden, and I needed to do something. And all those discoveries I made along the way led me to carnivore. And this is what's kept me healthy. I've helped some other myasthenia gravis patients as well as other autoimmune patients get into remission as well. And when I say remission, for those of you who are familiar with autoimmune and myasthenia, what I'm talking about is drug-free remission, okay? Because there are several types of remission. And there's been a little bit of confusion out there. And actually, a very nice lady not too long ago kind of filled me in on some more detail that even I wasn't aware of. So, good information. So here's I want to get into a little bit of the science of why this happens the way it does and other things in your body that are involved that are affected by diet. So first of all, let's deal with sugar and seed oils and that kind of thing. These items in particular, processed foods, they begin to cause issues in the gut. And over time, they'll cause something called leaky gut. And leaky gut can turn into all kinds of other nasty diseases and is often the start of your first metabolic dysfunction and the beginnings of autoimmune disease. It often starts with the leaky gut. Now, the thing to remember too with sugar is when you're getting your energy from sugar, well, everything in your body is using that sugar for energy, including your mitochondria. Now, your mitochondria is something that exists for every cell in the body except red blood cells. Everything else, they have from a few hundred to sometimes a few thousand, depending on what type of cell, where in the body it's located, that type of thing. So mitochondria will feed on sugar. They can survive, but they only have 25% of the energy on sugar that they do on ATP, which is converted directly from fat, dietary fat, or your own fat. So when you reduce over a long period of time the efficiency of your mitochondria, it loses its ability to not only heal, but to even recognize that there's a problem. And this is why cancer rates have skyrocketed in the last few decades, as well as so many other chronic diseases, because the mitochondria being fed sugar all the time can no longer recognize there's a problem. And even if it did, it couldn't fix it. So this is where the second half of chronic disease and autoimmune dysfunction come on. And now this particular type of dysfunction, this leads into issues with the brain. So this will feed into Alzheimer's or certain types of dementia. And matter of fact, Alzheimer's researchers are now referring to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. So it's really serious. And these let's talk a little bit about seed oils and how they damage your gut. So seed oils or vegetable oils, when they are collected before, they're collected from all over the place, shipped across the country, sent to a factory. By the time they get to the factory, the oil's already rancid. So they have to put it through several processes of heating and bleaching and chemical cleaning and all this kind of stuff. And every time they cycle the heat, it creates long chain polymers in the oil. So it's basically turning it into a liquid plastic. And that liquid plastic, when consumed, will create chronic inflammation across the board. Everywhere in your body, it'll be just constant inflammation. And that constant inflammation is the root of most chronic disease. Now, Dr. Berry, Dr. Ken Berry, he said something that was pretty interesting, and I believe it. He said if the entire population stopped eating processed foods, sugars, and seed oils, 80% of all chronic disease, mental illness, and cancer would go away. Or, new cancer cases, kind of thing, would just go away. And there's the metabolic science now to back it up.